Hey, HTDA, and today I aim to simplify Dyson Sphere Program. In the past, I've focused on perfect ratios, specific builds for each structure, and modular designs. With the upcoming Combat update in mind, I want to streamline my building process so I can easily adapt it to the new content. My recent playthrough did most of this using a modular approach with logistic bots, but they sometimes over-prioritize certain tasks. Now I want to address this issue, and on top of that I want to avoid having to dismantle my initial factory as the game progresses. That way, every single building you put down is permanently useful. Here's the plan. Minimize redesign, keep every building relevant except for belts. Scalability, ensure everything is upgradable and integrates with the future factory. Flexibility, make it easy to set up new buildings and items once they're introduced. And autopilot, simplify the process so it's effortless. If you're looking for a nice starting seat, this is one that has a starting system with a lot of nice properties. One of the nice things about this starting planet is that you start out on a large central continent that has a lot of room to build, but also all the resources that you might need for your initial factory. This is not going to be a full step-by-step guide. If you want one of those, I kindly refer you to my 2023 masterclass that has everything you might need. Rather, I'm going to show you the general process so you can follow along if you want. Because, again, the whole point of this is going to be that it's super simple. So, I'm just going to handcraft the materials I need for the basic research. Set up a miner to automate, first of all, iron, then copper, then stone. And then start automating some of the first materials. Now, there's actually a lot of thought put into how I'm doing this, because this setup will need to be able to scale up to the end game. It's never going to be removed if I get what I want, so that means I have to start thinking about what I put down from the very first building. So, why this layout? There's a box, so I can collect my resources and I don't have to manually grab them from all the different buildings. As you can see, we have the input coming from one direction and we have the output flowing into the same direction. That means that I can have all my logistics on this side and I can keep this side available to actually scale things up. Now, that means that this needs to be expanded in the future, so I actually need room to build. And as you can see, I have that. So there's no resource nodes over here, nothing else that can get in the way. I can just expand this in that direction. I also left some room over here. Why? Because at some point I want to start proliferating all of this, and that means I need to have room for those actually proliferation units to be put in here. Taking that principle in mind, the second line that I'm going to build is the gear production. Now, as you can see, I can easily feed in the first production into the second line, so I basically have a little bit of surplus of iron over here, but I'm also making gears now. And making sure that this is all nicely aligned, make sure that it's really easy to both expand in the same direction, because again, there's nothing in the way here. And one proliferation line in the future will make sure everything gets proliferated. Now, you don't have to worry too much about perfect ratios in this case, because I want some overproduction of everything, because those materials are going to be used elsewhere, because again, we want nothing to go to waste. Now, why did I pick the gears to be the second thing to build? Well, these two items are being used towards the production of belts, so it's just a matter of prioritizing the items you need first in order to make everything else more smoothly. And then using the same process, just add some other resource on top of that as well, especially the magnetic rings and the copper, because that basically allows you to make everything else in the game. Don't forget about the stone, because I almost ran out of stone, so that might just be me. And I also included a mining machine for coal. I'm also already doing a couple of things different than what I usually do. I'm using the starting nodes for one, because I know they're going to run out around the time I reach the ILS phase, and then I can just replace this with an ILS and keep my factory relevant. And I'm also building a relatively small amount of production. Normally I would make a factory that's completely optimized and produces a massive amount of stuff, but usually I find out that that's complete overkill, at least for the initial stages of the game, while you're mostly focused on expanding anyway. So you can see even this tiny little production over here is making more than enough resources, actually more than I'm going to use for a very long time. So this is more than enough. So the basic idea is that I just keep doing this. Every time I unlock a new item, I add in the production, and hopefully in such a way that it doesn't rely too much on the previous production. So for example, the coils, need the magnets. Those are not actually used anywhere else. I just feed them right into there. But the coils also need some copper, and I'm getting that out of here. Now I'm actually producing more copper than I need, so using that is not a problem. But for the circuit boards, I actually added in a secondary copper facility just to make sure that I'm not running low on actual copper just because I'm producing all of the magnetic coils on circuit boards. Similarly, I have added in a iron production facility over here for the exact same reason. And as I also unlock glass now, I added in a little glass facility. With the basic resources out of the way, I can start working on some blue science. Now, is this a fast facility? No. Is it working continuously and without any supervision needed? Yes, and every time I unlock something new, I need to put that into production anyway. I also want to, at this point, focus on starting up a mall, because again, that's just going to save me a lot of time in the long run. Also, this is future TDA here. I actually made an initial mistake by building this facility over here. Why? Because this is going to get into the way of this facility over here when I'm starting to expand either one of those. So what I will do sometime in the near future in this playthrough, I will move this facility somewhere up here so it's out of the way of the expansion of everything else. Oh man, it took me like 45 minutes until I remembered that power towers were a thing in this game, and I was just building this at a snail's pace. So make your own life a lot easier. Just build 3 of these so you can recharge yourself whenever, and just put those back in your inventory once you're charged up. Anyway, the mall is now built, and all I needed to do was just connect all the facilities that I already had up and running, including some steel that I just added in, and just make sure that it's connected to the mall and everything should start building. Most importantly, you get belts, sorters, and things like that. Basically, the first 5 things here in the row are the most important, so you can just keep expanding your factory. The design is exactly the same as in my last few playthroughs, but I'm actually going to make a little tweak to this. Ta-da! For some reason, I always keep using the Mark I sorters for a very, very long time, and it's so easy to make these Mark II sorters because all you need is engines, and similar to what I've done on the other side of this mall over here for the water pumps, it's just a matter of putting in another assembling machine and another assembling machine then to actually make the sorters, and voila, you now have Mark II sorters, so no reason not to do that very early on. Just means I needed to flip these 2 around as well, because initially the belts were on the start and the sorters were in the middle, so that's very inconvenient if you want to expand it. So future TDA here again. At this point I actually became smart and moved my science production to a place where I can actually expand it. And I also realized that upgrading your mech, especially early on, gives you a lot faster building speed, so make sure you don't forget to get those upgrades. Now, of course, we can also use the same layout principle to start upgrading everything else, like, for example, things that use oil. Again, the same principle, so I have the output over here. Now, with all these storage tanks, it takes up a little bit more room than the single box over here. But the idea is the same. We have this open space in the middle for the proliferation later on. We have the production facilities over here, and I can expand this production facility into that direction, to the left over here. Now, at some point, that will get in the way of this oil extractor, but this oil extractor will be the first one to run out, so I don't think that is necessarily a problem. Honestly, this way of playing this game makes it almost trivial to expand, also a little bit boring, so if you like all the perfect layouts and things like that, I won't blame you. That's definitely a little bit more intellectually challenging, but this is very effective, very straightforward, and especially when there's robots flying at your base and trying to destroy your facility, this might be the way to go. Speaking of simple and straightforward, I actually opted to stick with just wind turbines for now. Why? Because I do not want to deal with a breakdown of my thermal power plants at the worst possible time when I'm under attack once we have the combat update, and I don't have the silicon yet for solar panels, so wind power it is. And of course, this means that by adding in a graphite facility over here, again, just in line with everything else, nothing special going on here, and connecting a belt or 2 up to a matrix lab, or 6, that means I have now red science in production, and of course we need a couple more matrix labs to actually process that science, but now we can pretty much uncover about half of the technology tree. Now, this is not going to go fast. It also doesn't need to go fast because we're still in the process of expanding, unlocking new items, and keeping things simple. Now, again, if this is going too fast for you, check out my 2023 masterclass, which I cover everything in a lot more detail. My builds are a little bit more technical as well. But this is a very straightforward way to. You can see my entire base over here. And there's some stone and glass over here. There's some base materials mostly leading up to the coils and circuit boards over here. And then I have some more basic materials over here. And that's it. This is all you need to get everything going. And honestly, this is working pretty well. Yay, we can fly now, and I'll also show you how you can actually easily expand your production lines like I've already done over here, because you don't actually need specific blueprints for that. Nope, it's even easier than that. You just select the building you already have, you copy paste that part of the science, or the layout I mean, and then you can simply expand your production line like this. That's all you need. Just copy paste the first part, because the spacing is exactly enough to connect to the buildings you already have. Just make sure that you select everything up to the line just before the storage box. Now, just to avoid confusion, I'll show you how to make that layout actually. So start with a storage box, then put a smelter right next to it. Just draw a line of smelters like this, then delete the first one and place a power pole right next to the one that you already have. And then you're good to go. This is the exact spacing that I'm using everywhere else. Now, of course, if you have things like assembly machines, you'll need to kind of align that with the build you already have. If you do it like this, this gives you just about the same spacing as you have with 3 smelters. And for all the other buildings, it's a similar process, but I would just use this as an example, the smelting line as an example, and space everything else accordingly. Okay, so we officially reached the part of the game that I hate the most. Well, actually, I don't hate anything about this game, but this is the part I like the least, let's put it like that. And that is working my way to the actual automation of the yellow science, or I should say the actual automation of our interstellar logistics. Getting these ILSs up and running, as you might know, requires you to do a lot of research, not just a couple of those up here on the science tree, but also most of the stuff down here. On the bright side, because we have automated the red science and I didn't overspend a lot of time designing a nifty, awesome looking layout, I just have a layout that is working, that is actually producing some rather blue science. And while this is doing its job, I can just focus on actually building all those things that we unlock, because we'll need things like Titan alloy. That means that we need a lot of chemical production, some more oil, we need plastic, we need acid. We're also going to need things like the particle traps down here. So in other words, we have a lot of work to do, and we need to get our butts to the other planets and check out if this system is actually as neat as I hope it will be. Okay, so let's see what we have to work with. We have the gas giant, which has hydrogen and fire ice, which is really nice. What else? We have a second planet over here that has every single resource, not too much coal, but every single resource outside of that. It also has no oceans, nothing to obstruct our building, so that is awesome. And we can actually use both wind and solar energy here. So yes, this starting seed is very nice, because I like having a planet like this. This makes it really easy to build and not have to worry either about power issues or about, for example, silicon and titanium being on different planets. Now we actually have a third planet as well, of course, that has a ton of resources. Again, this has every single resource that we might need outside of course, the oil. It is a lava planet, which is not awesome, but it does have a very high construction area, and the wind's not that bad, the solar is really nice. So we're probably not going to initially use this planet too much. I really want to use this second planet, because this is basically going to be our main production planet. Now on this planet, I'm actually going to do something very similar to what I already did on the previous planet, and that is just start with all the basics and then build my way up from there. Because I do want every single resource in production and available on this planet, so we can, in the end, make this our main mall and main production planet, like I just said. But again, focus on the mall part. If we want to make every single building on this planet, we need every single resource on this planet as well. Okay, so while I built up the silicon and titanium production on the other planet and I ran out of materials, I flew back to our main planet over here, for now our main planet anyway, and I figured while I'm here I might as well just start up some chemical production, because we're in the process of unlocking things like the organic crystal, the titanium crystal and things like that. We're also going to need that for the actual yellow science, and we only have oil on this planet. And you know, something like this. Now I actually aligned the acid and the plastic and the organic crystal production exactly with the production I already have. So again, this can you may all make use of the same distribution line of proliferation once we actually get that up and running. Some more graphite production over here. This is one dedicated production line for graphite that is feeding into the organic crystal. It's more than we need, but that's fine because that just means we have surplus resources here that we can use elsewhere. And then a second line that I'm going to use specifically dedicated to diamond production, which I can't actually set the recipe yet because we're about to get that done. But while I'm at it, this is actually a fairly slow production process, so why not add some more? Now I have to admit at this point it almost feels like I'm cheating because it's so easy to expand all of this. I should probably add in a few more boxes like that so I can actually store some more asset. And yes, don't type in the comments, I know this is supposed to go into a storage tank. I just like the fact that this is all storage boxes. Don't hate me, please. I also added in the titanium crystals, which by now I researched. We have some water in production, actually way too much water probably, but hey, there's no such thing as too many resources. Not having to think too much about ratios and how much we're actually producing is actually really, really freeing. Just make sure that if you do something like this yourself, you should be overproducing all the lower tier items so that you don't run into an issue where you build like a lot of assemblers and then only like 2 of them are working. Why is this one not working? Well, we need titanium. So we're actually going to need to add in a few boxes and we're going to need to go back to the other planet and expand that one while picking up some titanium and bring that back here because for now we are the only logistics between planets. Speaking about logistics, on the second planet I now have processors up and running, and as you can see, a very straightforward layout. And I also have a couple of other things, so I have prisms, I have the, what are these called? The exciters, right? Yeah, the plasma exciters. Some more coils, we have gears, we have a lot of base production, so we can make some engines, and then we can make the most hated item in this game, turbines. Is this completely optimized and fully functional? No. Is it pretty close? Yes. And that is more than enough because as you can see, we have some engines, some turbines here already. Now, why is this important? Well, this means that I can actually start working on making some logistic distributors because yes, the bots are back in town. So I really liked the designs in my last playthrough where I built a mall out of setups like this. So with all the raw materials coming in, or at least the materials that you need to make the buildings, and then the buildings just being processed with a single assembler and being put in a box. Now you can of course also put a logistics distributor on top of these boxes and then have everything transported to you. But initially you don't have that many spaces where you can request items anyway, so I just pick them up manually. If you have a stack of these distributors and maybe 1 or 2 stacks of these bots, then that's going to last you a long way, especially since I'm not using the bots in order to transport items between parts of my production line. I'm using the belts to do that. That has the advantage of actually making sure that the resources are going exactly where I need them, rather than the bots randomly deciding which priority they should put on certain production lanes. They typically mess that up. And if you don't have a massive overproduction, that can really make sure that your production chain, at least in some parts, comes to a standstill because all the resources are going to a single unit. Now you can still see that I'm using the bots, but the bots are only being used to transport it to my, well, mall. It's not really a mall yet with 2 buildings, but you get what I'm going for, hopefully. One thing you can never have enough of is solar panels, so I decided to add in the build for that as well, and just make sure that you actually set limits on your storage units, because obviously otherwise the bots are just going to fill this completely up. And I guess it's now time to go back to the main planet with most of the core production that we need over here set up. So processors and turbines are basically the 2 things that I recommend that you really focus on the second planet first. Now we really need to get the science production a little bit faster up and running because this is now taking too long and we want to move on to the yellow science. So, scaling up my oil facility a little bit and making sure it's actually fully powered should go a long way in speeding up the red science production, which was the main bottleneck. Now, I also brought some titanium back to the planet as well, which I turned into this titanium crystals, as you can see over here. And with titanium crystals as well as diamonds, we actually have everything we need to make yellow science. The yellow science is easily automated by just using some of these logistic distributors that we just made, put in some boxes and connect them to a belt. Of course, this is going to be done differently most likely in the future, or maybe not. I kind of want to leave this as it is, because honestly we don't need a massive amount of yellow science production. We are already producing yellow science here. What we can do is just make a belt something like this, maybe something like this. Feed it in down here and then connect it up to this. Currently I'm not actually researching anything that needs yellow science just yet, but I'm almost there. The titanium alloy, of course, is as well as the ILS need that. We don't need that many, so we need about 200 of these crystals. How many do we have? I don't know, because they're mostly on the belts. We might need to fly back once more to get some more titanium, but we should be very close to having enough to actually unlock the ILS. While I'm back on the second planet, might as well just expand our mini-mall over here a little bit so we can start producing some thrusters and some of these drones. Not necessarily the major point of focus of what we want to do right now, so again, make sure you set the caps on the storage units appropriately. The one thing is though that we're going to need steel for this, and that's why I also added in some steel production over here. Again, with a dedicated iron line to it, so we make sure we're always producing a decent amount of steel, as long as of course we have the resources coming in, and this is not prioritized elsewhere. This was actually one of the main bottlenecks in my previous playthrough with the bots. The iron is in heavy demand pretty much everywhere in your facility, so it's really easy for all of that to funnel into a certain direction. For example, completely skipping steel, which cuts a huge hole in your production elsewhere. And this does not have that problem. So with the end goal of yellow science and ILSs in mind, I do need to go back to the main planet, and I've done that because I wasn't actually producing graphene just yet, and we're going to need that. In order to make that, we're going to need some more oil. The oil I had is actually still not run out anywhere close to that, but I just wanted to make sure that I get in some more oil production while we're at it. With the side benefit of actually producing a little bit more hydrogen as well. I'm going to regret producing hydrogen in an hour or so, but for now we actually need a lot of that in order to make the red science go a little bit faster. I also dropped off some more Titan steel, so we have a decent amount of titanium crystals now, so I think we're pretty much good to go to fly back once again to the other planet. And there you go, we now have Titan alloy in production on the second planet. Now, this is actually the first time I've built the Titan alloy production on the second planet rather than the first, so that means transporting the acid here rather than the titanium to the other planet. And I'm not 100% sure about it. I am 100% sure that this is less efficient in terms of transporting, because transporting this acid you can only do in stacks of 20 rather than the titanium in stacks of 100. You actually need quite a bit of acid as well, so as you can see it runs out fairly quick, but then again, you don't need much of either until you actually automate everything, and then it doesn't matter anymore. So I prefer just getting the production on the planet where I want to do my main production lines. And that is why I chose to do it here, but I wouldn't blame you if you start out on the other planet first. And with the power of larger blueprints unlocked, as well as the actual production of particle containers up and running, or it will be up and running as soon as I put some graphene in here, which of course I forgot to bring to this planet, so that's on me. We have everything we need to completely automate ILS production and thereby automate everything else. So this was a pretty straightforward first episode on the early game. I didn't want to spend too much time on that because I think most of you have seen that a few dozen times before. I did want to show you a bit of a twist on how you can approach the game, rather than going all sciencey about it. Just make it really, really straightforward. I think this is the most simplistic approach I've ever used in this game, and honestly, I kind of like it. It is very easy on the eyes. It's still very organized. It is still very efficient. It's also very easy to set up. You do need to think a little bit about your belts and then make sure you plan ahead. But other than that, it's actually pretty straightforward. It is not as simple as it might seem, because you do need to kind of think about what items you produce next to each other in order to kind of make sure your belts don't become one big spaghetti. I did leave myself a little bit more room to have belts go over each other and stuff like that, which I tend to avoid normally. I'm still using Mark 1 belts. That's a first for me, at least, this late into the game. Well, this is not late into the game, but you get what I mean. But really setting up everything in small pieces so we are ready to really scale up big time once we start scaling up, and I think we reached that point now. So that is what the next episode will be about. If you like this one, don't forget to like the video. It really helps out, especially at the beginning of a series, even if it's a smaller series like this one. Make sure that you comment if you have something to tell. And if you want to have a planet named after you, consider becoming a member of the channel as well. I don't have that many members just yet. There's no pressure on you to do that whatsoever. But of course, in the next episode, I am going to name some planets after people. If you want to be one of those, that is the way to get in. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to catch you in the next one.